Hey, son. Tonight we're stepping back into a time when America was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. Picture this. It's a Tuesday evening in 1926. Somewhere in a city apartment, a Victrola crackles to life with the sound of jazz. Down the street, a Ford Model T backfires and sputters to a stop. In a small-town parlor, a family gathers around their brand-new radio, voices hushed, eyes wide, listening to something coming from hundreds of miles away, as if it were magic. This was the decade when the old world and the new collided on every corner, in every home, in every conversation about what America was becoming. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying what we do here, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always good to know who's here with us on this journey back. So let me ask you something. What did it actually feel like to live through the roaring 20s? Not the movie version with flappers and champagne towers, but the real version, the one where most people still lived without electricity, where Prohibition made criminals out of neighbors, where the radio was so new that hearing a voice through it felt like witchcraft. What did the streets smell like when horses still shared the road with automobiles? What did it sound like when an entire country was dancing to jazz for the first time? What did people talk about over breakfast when everything from hemlines to airplanes to the stock market seemed to be racing forward all at once? And just like that, it is 1923. The sun is coming up over a city that never quite sleeps anymore. Somewhere a speakeasy is locking its doors. Somewhere else, a factory whistle blows. The smell of coal smoke and bread baking drifts through tenement windows. The day is just beginning, and so are we. Let's start with the morning, because that's where every day begins, even in the 1920s. But the morning you wake up depends entirely on where you are and who you are. If you're in a rural farmhouse in Iowa, you're rising before dawn to milk cows and light the stove, living a life that would have been recognizable to your grandparents. If you're in a tenement in New York City, you're waking to the sound of trolley bells, shouting vendors, and the smell of 100 different breakfasts cooking in 100 different apartments. The country is split, not just by geography, but by time itself. One foot still planted in the 1800s, the other stepping uncertainly into a future no one can quite predict. Your alarm is not electric. It might be a wind-up clock on the nightstand, ticking loud enough to hear through the walls. Or it might be the rooster crowing in the yard, the factory whistle blowing 3 blocks away, or simply the habit your body has formed after years of waking at the same hour. The room is cold. Heat does not reach the bedrooms in most houses, so you sleep under quilts heavy enough to pin you to the mattress, sewn by your grandmother or your mother, or bought second-hand from a neighbor whose children have grown. You lie there for a moment, listening. If you're in the city, the sounds start early. Horses still pull delivery wagons through the streets, their hooves clopping on cobblestones or dirt roads that turn to mud when it rains. Milk bottles clink as the milkman makes his rounds. Someone is already sweeping the sidewalk, already shouting in Italian or Yiddish or Polish to a friend across the street. If you're in the country, the sounds are different, but just as persistent. Chickens clucking, pigs snorting, the wind moving through the trees, the creak of the windmill turning in the yard. You swing your legs out of bed and your feet hit a cold floor. Wood, mostly, sometimes linoleum, if you're fortunate. No carpet, no radiant heat, no thermostat you can adjust with the flick of a finger. The air smells like wood smoke from the stove downstairs, like last night's dinner still lingering in the walls. like bodies and wool and the faint mustiness of a house that is never quite dry. You reach for your clothes, folded on a chair or hanging on a nail in the wall, and you dress quickly because the cold does not wait for modesty. This is the America you wake up to in the 1920s. Not one America, but many, layered on top of each other, like the quilts on your bed. The city and the country, the immigrant and the native-born, the factory worker and the farmer, the rich and the poor, all of them waking to the same sun, but to entirely different worlds. And the strange thing, the thing that makes this decade different from the ones before it, is that those worlds are starting to bleed into each other. The radio will bring the city to the country. The automobile will bring the country to the city. And slowly, gradually, sometimes violently, America will begin to realize that it cannot stay divided forever. But for now, this morning, you are simply awake. The day is waiting, and whether you are pulling on overalls or a factory uniform or a house dress, whether you are heading to a field or a streetcar or a schoolhouse, you are part of a country that is changing faster than it can understand. You can feel it, even if you cannot name it. Something is shifting. Something is coming. And the morning, as always, is where it begins. It is still early, and you need to wash your face, brush your teeth, and get ready for the day. But there is no bathroom as we know it now, not for most people. If you live in the city, you might have a shared toilet down the hall or in the backyard, a cold, drafty place you visit quickly and leave quicker. If you live in the country, you have an outhouse, a wooden shed that smells exactly as you'd expect and freezes solid in winter. Running water is a luxury most homes do not have. You heat water on the stove, pour it into a basin, and wash with a cloth and a bar of hard soap that smells like lye. Your mother might have a pitcher and bowl set on a washstand in the bedroom. It is functional, not comfortable, and privacy is something you learn to do without. The wash basin is chipped porcelain, stained from years of use, sitting on a wooden stand beside a mirror that has lost half its silver backing. You pour water from the pitcher, and if it's winter, you pour carefully because the water might have a skim of ice on top. The shock of cold water on your face wakes you fully, makes your skin tingle and your breath catch. There is no hot water heater, no faucet that runs warm at the turn of a handle. If you want warm water, someone has to heat it on the stove, and that takes time and fuel, both of which are in limited supply. The soap is rough, handmade, or store-bought in a plain paper wrapper. It does not smell like lavender or honey or whatever the advertisements promise today. It smells like lye and tallow, like something designed to remove dirt, not to pamper. You scrub your face, your neck, behind your ears. Your mother taught you that cleanliness is next to godliness. And even if you do not have much, you can have clean skin and clean hands. You dry off with a towel that is thin from washing, rough from drying on the line, and shared by everyone in the household. Brushing your teeth is a simpler affair. You might have a toothbrush, bristles made from animal hair, or you might use a cloth dipped in baking soda or salt. Toothpaste exists, but it is not universal. Some families make their own, mix in powders and pastes that taste medicinal and gritty. You brush quickly, spit into a bowl, and rinse with water from the pitcher. Dentists are expensive, and most people only go when the pain becomes unbearable. You've already lost a tooth or two, and you're not yet 30. And then there was the matter of the toilet. If you're in a tenement building, there might be one shared bathroom for the entire floor, 4 or 5 families all using the same fixture. You wait your turn, you go quickly, and you do not linger. If you're in a farmhouse, you pull on your coat, step into your boots, and walk across the yard to the outhouse. In summer, it is bearable. In winter, it is an ordeal, the kind of thing that makes you delay as long as possible and hurry once you commit. The outhouse is dark, cold, and occupied by spiders in the corners. There is a wooden seat with a hole, and beneath it, the pit that someone will have to move or cover over when it fills. You use torn newspaper or old catalog pages because toilet paper is not yet standard. And when you finish, you hurry back to the house, breathing through your mouth, grateful to be done. This is hygiene in the 1920s. It is not convenient, not private, and not always pleasant. But it is routine, the same ritual repeated every morning by millions of people who do not think of it as hardship because they have never known anything else. The bathroom, with its gleaming tile and endless hot water, is still a dream for most Americans, something they see in magazines or in the homes of the wealthy. For now, there is the basin, the soap, the outhouse, and the understanding that cleanliness requires effort, and effort is simply part of being alive. Now you need to get dressed, and this is no small task. Clothing in the 1920s is a study in contradiction. Fashion magazines show short skirts, bobbed hair, and sleeveless dresses. But most women are still wearing corsets, stockings held up with garters, and layers of cotton and wool. Men wear suits almost everywhere, even to manual labor jobs, and a hat is not optional. You dress according to your role, your class, and your location. A flapper in Chicago wears something entirely different from a farmer's wife in Nebraska, and both would be scandalized by what the other considers normal. Getting dressed is not about comfort. It is about signaling who you are and where you belong in a world that is changing its signals faster than anyone can keep up. If you are a woman, you start with undergarments. A chemise or slip goes on first, then the corset, though by the mid-20s, some younger women have abandoned it in favor of lighter brasiers and girdles. The corset is stiff, boned with steel or whalebone, laced up the back with the help of a sister or mother or neighbor, because you cannot reach the laces yourself. It pinches your waist, flattens your chest, and restricts your breathing just enough to remind you it is there. Over that goes a camisole, then stockings, rolled silk or cotton held up by garters clipped to a garter belt. The stockings have seams up the back, and keeping those seams straight is an art form in itself. Your dress depends on what you will be doing. If you are going to work in an office or shop, you wear something modest, hemline at the knee or below, sleeves that cover your arms. If you are staying home to clean and cook, you wear something simpler, a house dress made of cotton with an apron tied over to protect the fabric from grease and dirt. And if you are one of the rare women who has embraced the flapper style, you wear a drop-waist dress that hangs loose, no corset, no sleeves, hemline scandalously above the knee. You pair it with a cloche hat pulled low over your bobbed hair, and you know that older women are whispering about you as you walk past. If you are a man, dressing is no less particular. You start with an undershirt, then trousers held up by suspenders because belts are not yet common. A button-up shirt, often white or pale blue, tucked in neatly. A vest over that, buttoned up to the chest. Then a jacket, wool or tweed, cut to fit snugly across the shoulders. A tie, knotted carefully at the collar. And finally, a hat. Always a hat. Fedoras, bowlers, flat caps, depending on your class and occupation. A man without a hat is a man without dignity. Or so the thinking goes. Your shoes are leather, stiff, and built to last because replacing them is expensive. If you are a laborer, your boots are heavy, scuffed, caked with mud or oil or dust from the factory floor. If you are a businessman, your shoes are polished, laced, and inspected every morning for scuffs. Women's shoes have heels, not the towering stilettos of later decades, but practical heels that click on pavement and make walking on cobblestones an exercise in balance. Everything you wear is chosen with purpose. Your clothing tells the world who you are before you open your mouth. It tells them if you are respectable or reckless, wealthy or working class, modern or traditional. And in a decade when the rules are changing, when hemlines are rising, and women are cutting their hair, and young people are rejecting the values of their parents, what you wear is not just fashion. It is a statement. It is armor. It is identity. And every morning, as you button and lace and tie, you are deciding which version of yourself to present to a world that is watching, judging, and changing all around you. It is time to eat, and the kitchen is already warm from the wood stove or the coal range that has been burning since before you woke. If you are lucky enough to live in a city with electrical lines, you might have a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, but most homes in America are still lit by kerosene lamps and candles. Breakfast is simple: oatmeal, toast, eggs. If you keep chickens, coffee percolated on the stovetop. There is no refrigerator, so milk is kept in an icebox if you are fortunate, or in the coolest part of the cellar if you are not. Butter goes rancid in summer. Bread goes stale by the second day. You eat what is fresh, what is seasonal, and what you can afford, which for many families is not much at all. The kitchen smells like wood smoke and coffee, with the faint sweetness of oatmeal bubbling on the stove. Your mother or your wife is already there, has been there, for half an hour, stoking the fire, boiling water, slicing bread from the loaf bought yesterday or baked the day before. The stove is cast iron, black, heavy, with burners on top and an oven below. It takes skill to cook on it, to know when the fire is too hot, when it needs more fuel, how to adjust the dampers, to control the heat. There are no dials, no thermostats, just experience and instinct. You sit at the table, scrubbed wood or oilcloth covering, with mismatched chairs that have been in the family for years. The table is set with plain white dishes, chipped at the edges, and thick ceramic mugs for coffee. The coffee is strong, percolated until it is almost black, bitter enough to make you wince if you forget to add sugar. Sugar is kept in a bowl with a spoon, and you take one lump, maybe two if it has been a hard week and you need the sweetness. The oatmeal is served in bowls, thick and steaming, with a pat of butter melting on top if there is butter to spare. You add milk if the icebox still has some, or you eat it plain, with a sprinkle of sugar or a drizzle of molasses. It is filling, hot, and cheap, which makes it the foundation of breakfast for millions of families. Toast comes next, bread sliced thick and toasted over the open flame of the stove, held with a long fork until it browns and crisps. You spread it with butter or jam, strawberry or blackberry, put up in jars last summer when the fruit was ripe. Eggs are a luxury, but not an impossible one. If you keep chickens, you have eggs most mornings, fried in a cast iron skillet with a little lard or bacon grease. The yolk is bright yellow, the white crispy at the edges. You eat it with the toast, breaking the yolk and letting it soak into the bread. If there is bacon, it is thick cut, salty, fried, until the fat renders out and the edges curl. The smell of it fills the kitchen, and even though it is just breakfast, it feels like abundance. But not every family has eggs, or bacon, or even butter. For few are the poorest families. Breakfast might be bread and coffee, or bread and water, or nothing at all until lunch. Children go to school with empty stomachs, and their teachers know it, can see it in the way they cannot concentrate, cannot sit still, cannot think about arithmetic, when all they can think about is hunger. There is no refrigerator humming in the corner. The icebox, if you have one, is a wooden cabinet lined with tin or zinc with a block of ice in the top compartment. The iceman delivers it twice a week, carrying it with tongs up the stairs and into the kitchen, leaving a trail of water behind him. The ice keeps things cool, but not cold, and it melts, dripping into a pan below that someone has to remember to empty. Milk spoils quickly, so you buy only what you need for a day or two. Meat is bought fresh and cooked the same day. Leftovers are kept overnight and sniffed carefully before being eaten. This is breakfast in the 1920s. It is not elaborate, not gourmet, not Instagrammable, but it is nourishing and it is shared, and it is the fuel that carries you through the day. You finish your coffee, wipe your mouth, and push back from the table. The dishes will be washed later, in water heated on the stove and poured into a basin. For now, there is work to do, and the morning is already slipping away. The workday is calling, and you need to get there. How you travel depends on where you live and how much money you have. In cities, streetcars and elevated trains rattle through neighborhoods packed with workers in caps and dresses, all heading toward factories, offices, and shops. If you own a car, you are part of a new and growing class. But the roads are rough, the tires blow out constantly, and gas stations are few and far between. In small towns and rural areas, horses are still the primary mode of transportation. The roads are mud in spring, dust in summer, and frozen ruts in winter. The world is in transition, caught between the clip-clop of hooves and the sputter of internal combustion engines, and nobody is quite sure which one will win. You step out onto the street and into the noise. The city is already awake, already moving. Streetcars clang down the middle of the road, sparks flying from the overhead wires. They stop every few blocks, and people climb on and off, pressing coins into the conductor's hand. You push your way aboard, finding a strap to hold because the seats are full, and you sway with the motion as the car lurches forward. The windows are open in summer, closed in winter, and the air inside smells like wet wool, cigarette smoke, and too many bodies in too small a space. If you ride the elevated train, you climb stairs to the platform and wait for the train to arrive, loud and clattering on iron rails above the street. The view from the platform is rooftops and laundry lines, billboards advertising soap and cigarettes, the backsides of buildings that were never meant to be seen. The train is faster than the streetcar, but it is also louder, shaking so hard that you can feel it in your teeth. You hold tight to the pole and watch the city slide past the windows, block after block of brick and smoke and movement. If you own an automobile, you are among the fortunate. The Ford Model T has made car ownership possible for the middle class, but that does not mean it is easy. You start the car with a hand crank at the front, a task that requires strength and timing and has been known to break wrists and fingers when the engine backfires. The tires are thin, and punctures are common, so you carry a repair kit and a spare tire in the back. The roads are terrible, unpaved except in the largest cities, full of ruts and rocks and mud holes that can swallow a wheel. There are no traffic lights in most places, no stop signs, no painted lanes. You navigate by instinct and luck, dodging horses, pedestrians, and other cars, all of whom seem to have their own ideas about who has the right of way. Gas stations are a new invention, and they are not everywhere. You fill up when you see one, paying a few cents per gallon, watching the attendant pump it by hand into your tank. The car is temperamental. It overheats in summer, refuses to start in winter, and makes strange noises that you learn to interpret like a language. But it is yours, and it gives you freedom. You can drive to work, to church, to visit family in the next county. You can take your sweetheart out to the country on a Sunday afternoon, away from the eyes of parents and neighbors. The car is changing courtship, changing work, changing the shape of the city itself. In the country, you might still hitch the horse to a wagon and ride into town. The horse knows the way, has made this trip 100 times before. You sit on the wooden seat, reins loose in your hands, and let the rhythm of the hooves lull you into thought. The roads are dirt, sometimes gravel, lined with fences and fields. You pass other wagons, tip your hat, call out a greeting. The trip takes an hour, maybe more, but there is no hurry. The horse sets the pace, and you follow. This is the commute in the 1920s. It is slow by modern standards, uncomfortable, sometimes dangerous, but it is also communal. You share the streetcar with strangers who become familiar faces. You wave to neighbors as you pass in your car or wagon. You are not isolated in a private bubble, not yet. You are part of the flow of the city, the town, the world, moving from home to work and back again. And for now, that is enough. If you work in a factory, your day begins with a whistle and ends with another 1:10 or 12 hours later. The floor is loud, filled with the clang of metal, the hiss of steam, the rhythmic pounding of machines that never stop. You stand in one place, repeating the same motion hundreds of times, your hands moving faster than your mind. There are no safety guards on the machines, no brakes mandated by law, no health insurance if you lose a finger or worse. Children work beside you, some as young as 10. Their small hands useful for tasks adults cannot manage. Unions are growing and strikes are common. But so is retaliation. If you complain, you are replaced. The factory does not care about you. It cares about production, about profit, about keeping the line moving no matter what. The whistle blows at 7 in the morning, and you are expected to be at your station when it does. If you are late, you lose pay. If you are late too many times, you lose your job. The factory floor is a cavern of noise and motion. Brick walls rising 3 or 4 stories, windows high and narrow, letting in light but not much air. In summer, the heat is unbearable, 100 degrees or more, with no ventilation, no fans, just the stifling press of bodies and machines. In winter, it is barely warmer, the furnaces heating the machines, but not the workers. You work at a station, a specific point on the assembly line. Maybe you are tightening bolts on automobile parts. Maybe you are feeding fabric into a sewing machine. Maybe you are packing cans, inspecting bottles, cutting steel. The motion is repetitive, the same action over and over until your arms ache and your back screams and your mind goes numb. You are not encouraged to think. You are encouraged to move, to keep pace, to not slow down the line. The machines are dangerous. Belts and gears spin uncovered, fast enough to catch a sleeve, a hand, a strand of hair. If you get caught, the machine does not stop. You have seen it happen, seen men pulled in, heard the screaming, seen the blood. The foreman shuts down the line long enough to pull out the body, and then it starts again. There is no investigation, no compensation for the family, just a new worker hired to take the empty spot. You learn to be careful, to keep your hands clear, to tie back your hair, to never let your attention drift. Breaks are short and unofficial. You eat lunch at your station if why each one. You brought something, bread and cheese, maybe an apple, something you can eat quickly without utensils. There is no cafeteria, no break room, just the floor and the noise, and the few minutes you can steal to rest your hands. The bathroom is a shared outhouse in the yard, and you hurry there and back, because the foreman is watching, timing how long you are gone. Children work here, too, boys and girls both, hired because their small hands can reach into machines, because they can be paid less, because their families need the money. They are supposed to be in school, but the law is rarely enforced, and even when it is, the fines are small enough that the factory owners pay them and keep hiring. The children stand on boxes to reach the machines, their faces pale and tired, their hands scarred and calloused. They do not play, do not laugh, do not run. They work, just like you, just like everyone. Unions are trying to change this. The American Federation of Labor, the industrial workers of the world, they are organizing, demanding shorter hours, better pay, safer conditions. Strikes break out, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent. You have walked picket lines, carried signs, stood face to face with police, and hired thugs brought in to break the strike. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And either way, you go back to work, because you have no choice. The whistle blows again at 6 p.m, and you step out into the fading light, your ears ringing, your body exhausted. You smell like oil and sweat and metal. Your hands are black with grease, your clothes stained and worn. But you have made it through another day. You have earned your pay, a few dollars for 10 hours of work, enough to feed your family if you are careful, enough to survive if nothing goes wrong. And tomorrow the whistle will blow again, and you will be back. Because this is work in the 1920s. It is hard, it is dangerous, and for millions of Americans, it is life. If you live in the country, your work is dictated by the season, the weather, and the animals. You rise with the sun and work until it sets, plowing fields, planting seeds, harvesting crops, feeding livestock. There are no weekends, no vacations, no such thing as clocking out. Farming in the 1920s is still done mostly by hand or with horse-drawn equipment, though tractors are beginning to appear on the largest farms. You are at the mercy of drought, flood, insects, and market prices you have no control over. A bad year can ruin you. A good year might let you break even. The work is relentless, the rewards uncertain, and the knowledge that your children will likely leave for the city hangs over every meal like a shadow. The day starts before dawn. You pull on boots still damp from yesterday, step out into the chill, and head to the barn. The cows need milking, and they do not care that you are tired, or that your back hurts, or that you went to bed only 5 hours ago. You sit on a low stool, forehead pressed against the cow's warm flank, and pull the teats in a rhythm you have known since childhood. The milk hisses into the pail, steaming in the cold air, and when the pail is full, you carry it to the house, pour it through a strainer, and set it in the ice box or the cool cellar. The chickens need feeding, the pigs need slop, the horses need grain and water. You move through the chores with the efficiency of repetition, every action practiced 1,000 times. The barn smells like hay and manure and animal warmth. A smell that clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin. You do not notice it anymore. It is simply the smell of work. Breakfast is quick, and then you are back outside. The fields are waiting. If it is spring, you are plowing, turning over the soil with a horse-drawn plow, walking behind it for hours, guiding the blade through dirt that is sometimes hard as stone, sometimes soft and crumbling. The reins are wrapped around your shoulders, and you lean into the work, feeling the resistance of the earth, the pull of the horse, the strain in your legs and back. If it is summer, you are planting or weeding or irrigating, depending on what you grow. Corn, wheat, cotton, tobacco, vegetables for the table and for sale. You work in rows, bending and straightening, until your spine feels like it will snap. The sun is relentless, beating down on your neck, soaking through your shirt. There is no shade, no breeze, just the heat and the work and the knowledge that if you stop, the crops do not get planted, and if the crops do not get planted, you do not eat. If it is fall, you are harvesting, cutting wheat with a scythe, or a mechanical reaper if you can afford one, picking cotton by hand, pulling corn from the stalks and loading it onto wagons. Your hands blister and bleed. Your muscles scream. You work from dawn until dark, racing against the weather, against the first frost, against the possibility that all your work will be for nothing. And if it is winter, you are repairing equipment, mending fences, cutting firewood, doing all the tasks that were put off during the busy months. Winter is the closest thing you get to rest. But even then, the animals still need care, the house still needs heat, and there is always something that needs fixing. The tractor is changing farming, but slowly. Only the largest, wealthiest farms can afford them, and even then, they are temperamental, expensive to maintain, and require gasoline that must be hauled in from town. Most farmers still rely on horses, on human labor, on the same methods their fathers and grandfathers used. It is hard work, back-breaking work, and it is getting harder to make a living at it. Crop prices are low, driven down by overproduction and consolidation. You plant more to make up for the low prices, but so does everyone else, and the prices drop further. The bank holds the mortgage on your land, and every year it feels like the debt grows heavier. One bad harvest, one dry summer, one infestation of locusts, and you could lose everything. Your children see this. They see you working yourself to exhaustion for uncertain rewards. They hear the worry in your voice when you talk about money, about the weather, about the future. And they decide, one by one, that they do not want this life. They leave for the city, for factory jobs, for anything that offers a regular paycheck and a chance to sleep past dawn. You do not blame them. You understand. But it breaks your heart a little, knowing that the land you have worked your whole life to keep will not stay in the family, that the farm will die with you. This is farming in the 1920s. It is honest work, hard work, work that feeds the nation. But it is also work that is slowly being left behind as a country shifts from rural to urban, from agriculture to industry, from the rhythms of the seasons to the rhythms of the clock. Somewhere in the house or down at the drugstore, there is a telephone. It is a wooden box on the wall with a crank on the side and a receiver that hangs on a hook. To make a call, you pick up the receiver and wait for the operator to ask who you want to speak to. She connects you by plugging a cord into a switchboard, and then you talk loudly because the line crackles and hisses, and half the conversation is drowned out by static. Everyone on your party line can listen in if they want to, and they often do. Privacy is a concept the telephone has not yet learned. Still, it is a marvel. You can speak to someone across town, across the state, even across the country if you are willing to pay for it. The world is getting smaller, and the telephone is one of the tools making it happen. The telephone is not in every home, not by a long stretch. In cities, wealthier families have private lines, their own numbers, their own connections. But most people share a party line with 3 or 4 or even 10 other families. Each family has a specific ring pattern, 2 long and a short, or 1 long and 2 shorts, so you know which calls are meant for you. But the problem is, everyone can hear every ring, and anyone can pick up and listen. You lift the receiver and hear the operator's voice, clipped and professional, asking for your number. You give her the name of the person you want to reach, because in small towns, everyone knows everyone, and numbers are often unnecessary. She plugs in the cord, the line clicks and buzzes, and then you hear ringing on the other end. When someone answers, you speak loudly, enunciating each word, because the connection is fragile and clarity is not guaranteed. Conversations are brief. Long-distance calls are expensive, charged by the minute, and even local calls feel too precious to waste on idle chatter. You say what you need to say, you listen to the response, and you hang up. The receiver is heavy, bakelite, or hard rubber, and it clatters when you place it back on the hook. But the party line means your neighbors are listening. You hear the soft click when someone picks up, the faint sound of breathing on the line. You know Mrs. Henderson, 3 houses down, is listening because she always does, because she has nothing better to do than collect gossip and spread it at the church social. So you speak carefully, avoid saying anything too personal, and accept that privacy is a luxury the telephone cannot provide. The operator sits in a building downtown in front of a massive switchboard with rows and rows of plugs and sockets. She wears a headset, and her hands move constantly, pulling cords, pushing them into holes, connecting voices across miles of copper wire. She knows everyone's voice, everyone's business. She hears arguments, love confessions, emergencies. She is the keeper of secrets, the silent witness to a town's entire life. When someone needs the doctor in the middle of the night, she connects them. When someone wants to place an order with the general store, she connects them. She is the hub, and the town revolves around her. For the first time in history, you do not have to wait days for a letter to arrive or travel miles to deliver a message in person. You can simply pick up the telephone, and within seconds, you are speaking to someone far away. It collapses distance, erases isolation, and brings people together in a way that feels almost magical. But it also brings a new kind of anxiety. The telephone can ring at any hour with news you do not want to hear. An accident, an illness, a death. The sound of the ring, once exciting, becomes ominous, especially late at night when good news does not travel. You learn to brace yourself before answering, to prepare for the worst, because the telephone delivers bad news as efficiently as it delivers good. Still, the telephone is here, and it is changing everything. Businesses use it to place orders, to check prices, to coordinate deliveries. Families use it to stay in touch, to plan gatherings to check on aging parents. Doctors use it to receive calls from patients, to direct ambulances, to consult with colleagues. The telephone is weaving a new kind of network across the country, invisible but powerful, connecting people in ways that were unimaginable just a generation before. And in small towns and big cities alike, the telephone becomes a fixture, a piece of furniture, a tool, and a symbol. It represents progress, modernity, the future arriving one ring at a time. You may not have running water or electricity, but if you have a telephone, you are connected. You are part of the world. And that world, once vast and distant, is now just a crank and a conversation away. It is evening now, and the family gathers around the radio. This is still new, still magical, still hard to believe. A wooden cabinet sits in the parlor, and when you turn the dial, voices and music come out of it, live from somewhere far away. You listen to jazz from New York, news from Washington, sermons from Chicago. The radio does not care where you live or how much money you have. It brings the world to you. For the first time in history, the entire country can hear the same thing at the same time. It creates a shared culture, a shared language, a sense of being part of something larger. And it also creates a hunger for more, for faster, for newer, for the next thing that will arrive through the air and change everything again. The radio is the center of the room now. The furniture is arranged around it, chairs pulled close so everyone can hear. The cabinet is polished wood, sometimes ornate with carved details, sometimes plain and functional. Inside is a tangle of wires and tubes, technology that no one in the house fully understands, but everyone knows how to use. You turn the dial slowly, carefully, listening as stations fade in and out, voices rising from static and then disappearing again. When you find a station, you stop. The sound crackles and pops. But underneath is music, or a voice, or a drama unfolding in real time. You sit and listen, and for an hour or two, the world beyond your walls comes into your home. It is intimate and immediate in a way nothing has been before. The newspaper is a day old by the time you read it. Letters take weeks to arrive, but the radio is now happening as you listen, alive. The programs are varied. There is music, jazz and blues, and big band orchestras playing live from ballrooms and theaters. There are comedy shows, drama serials that keep you coming back night after night to find out what happens next. There are news broadcasts, the first time most people hear a president's voice, or learn about events happening across the country on the same day they occur. There are church services for those who cannot attend in person, and farm reports for those who need to know crop prices and weather forecasts. Children sit on the floor, eyes wide, listening to adventure serials, stories of cowboys and detectives and explorers. They imagine the scenes in their minds, building the pictures from the voices and sound effects, the creaking doors and galloping horses and gunshots that make them jump. It is theater without a stage, stories without pages, entertainment that requires nothing but attention. The radio also brings advertising, a new kind of selling that speaks directly into your home. Companies sponsor programs, and in exchange, they get to tell you about their soap, their cereal, their cigarettes. The ads are cheerful, insistent, designed to create desire. And they work. People start asking for products by name, brands they have never seen but have heard about on the radio. For farmers and people in small towns, the radio is a revelation. It breaks the isolation that has defined rural life for generations. You are no longer cut off from the world, no longer dependent on the weekly newspaper or the occasional traveler for news. You can hear a speech from the president, a concert from a famous orchestra, a baseball game from a city you have never visited. The world is suddenly smaller, more accessible, less foreign. But the radio also creates a kind of homogenization. Regional accents start to soften as people hear the same announcers, the same voices, speaking in the same polished, neutral tones. Local traditions begin to compete with national trends. The music you hear on the radio, the slang you pick up, the fashions you learn about, they all come from somewhere else. And slowly, they replace what was local and particular with something shared and standardized. The radio is also a political tool. Politicians learn quickly that they can speak directly to voters, bypassing newspapers and local rallies. They can craft a message, control the tone, and deliver it simultaneously to millions of people. It changes campaigns, changes governance, and changes the relationship between leaders and citizens. And at night, when the programs end and the stations sign off, you turn the dial to silence, switch off the radio, and sit for a moment in the quiet. The voices are gone, the music has stopped, but the feeling remains. You have been somewhere else, heard something new, felt connected to a country that is vast and varied and moving faster than you can keep up with. The radio has brought the world to you. And tomorrow night you will gather again, turn the dial, and let it in once more. Let us talk about drinking, because in the 1920s it is illegal, which means everyone is doing it. Prohibition has made alcohol a crime, but it has not made it disappear. Instead, it has made it more expensive, more dangerous, and more exciting. If you want a drink, you go to a speakeasy, a hidden bar, behind an unmarked door, down a dark alley, up a narrow staircase. You knock, someone looks through a slot, and if they recognize you, they let you in. Inside, it is crowded, smoky, loud, with jazz and laughter. The liquor is bootlegged, mixed in. Bathtubs smuggled from Canada, made in hidden stills in the woods. Some of it will make you blind. Some of it will kill you. But people drink it anyway, because Prohibition has turned an ordinary pleasure into an act of rebellion. And rebellion always tastes sweeter. The 18th Amendment went into effect in 1920, banning the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. The idea was to improve public morals, reduce crime, and strengthen families. The result was the opposite. Prohibition created a massive underground economy, turned ordinary citizens into criminals, and made organized crime richer and more powerful than it had ever been. You know where the speakeasy is because someone told you, a friend, a coworker, someone you trust. The location is not advertised. There is no sign, no menu posted in the window. Just a door, often in a basement, or behind a legitimate business, a laundry or bookshop or a restaurant. You approach at night, when the streets are darker and the police are less likely to be watching. You knock in a specific pattern or you say a password, something simple and changeable. The door opens a crack, a face peers out, and if you pass the test, you are allowed inside. The room is dim, lit by candles or low electric bulbs. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, perfume, sweat, and the sweet smell of gin. Tables are packed close together, and every seat is full. Women with bobbed hair and bright lipstick sit beside men in suits, laughing, drinking, dancing. The music is loud, a live band playing jazz. Something fast and syncopated that makes you want to move. The dance floor is small and crowded, couples pressed together, moving to rhythms that would have been scandalous a decade ago. The bar is in the back, makeshift, bottles hidden behind a false wall or under the counter in case of a raid. The bartender pours drinks quickly, No measuring, no fussing, just liquor into a glass. Gin is the most common, cheap to make, easy to flavor with juniper or fruit to cover the harsh taste. Whiskey comes from Canada or from stills in the Appalachian Hills. Beer is harder to hide, harder to transport, so it is less common. The drinks are strong, meant to get you drunk quickly, and they succeed. You pay in cash, no receipts, no records. The prices are high because the risk is high. A drink that would have cost a nickel before Prohibition now costs 50 cents or more. But you pay it because this is the only way to get it, and because being here, doing something illegal, feels thrilling. The speakeasy is also a social leveler. In the same room, you might find factory workers and businessmen, flappers and housewives, black musicians and white patrons. Prohibition has created a space where the usual rules do not quite apply, where people mix who would not mix elsewhere. It is not equality, not by a long stretch, but it is closer than most places in the segregated, stratified world of the 1920s. But there is danger. The police raid speakeasies regularly, smashing bottles, arresting patrons, shutting down the operation. Sometimes the raids are real, sometimes they are for show, because the police are often paid off, part of the network that keeps the liquor flowing. You learn to recognize the signs, the sudden tension, the bartender disappearing, the back door opening. You learn to leave quickly, to blend into the crowd, to not get caught. And then there is the liquor itself. Bootleg alcohol is unregulated, made by people who care more about profit than safety. Sometimes it is contaminated with methanol, industrial alcohol that causes blindness, paralysis, death. People die from bad liquor, and the newspapers report it, but the speakeasies stay full. The risk is part of the appeal. Prohibition will last until 1933, when it is finally repealed, admitted to be a failure. But in the meantime, it shapes the decade. It funds gangsters like Al Capone, who make millions from illegal liquor. It creates a culture of law-breaking where ordinary people learn to disrespect and evade authority. And it makes drinking, once a casual social activity, into something charged with meaning, with rebellion, with the thrill of doing what you are not supposed to do. In the speakeasy, with a glass of gin in your hand and jazz in your ears, you are not just drinking. You are defying the law, embracing the modern world, and tasting the freedom that the 1920s promised, even if it is dangerous, even if it is fleeting, even if it might all come crashing down tomorrow. The music playing in that speakeasy is jazz, and it is unlike anything America has heard before. It is fast, it is improvisational, it is black, and it is everywhere. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith. They are creating something entirely new, something that makes people want to dance, in ways their parents would have called scandalous. Jazz is born in New Orleans, raised in Chicago, and celebrated in Harlem, where the Renaissance is in full swing, and black artists, writers, and musicians are redefining American culture. White audiences flock to hear it, to feel it, to move to it, even as they live in a segregated world that refuses to acknowledge the humanity of the people creating it. Jazz is the sound of the 1920s, but it is also the sound of contradiction, of progress and prejudice playing side by side. The instruments are brass and woodwind, trumpet and saxophone, trombone and clarinet, backed by piano and drums and the deep pulse of a bass. The sound is complex, layered, with melodies that weave in and out of each other, rhythms that shift and syncopate in ways that classical music never did. It is music that demands attention, that makes you tap your foot, that gets into your body and refuses to let go. Louis Armstrong plays his trumpet with a virtuosity that leaves audiences stunned. His solos are inventive, playful, technically brilliant. He scats, singing nonsense syllables that match the rhythm and melody of his horn, and suddenly everyone is trying to imitate him. Duke Ellington leads his orchestra with sophistication and elegance, composing pieces that are both danceable and artistically ambitious. Bessie Smith sings the blues with a voice so powerful, so full of pain and longing, that grown men weep listening to her. The music comes from the black experience in America, from the churches and the cotton fields, from the juke joints and the dance halls of the South. It carries the weight of slavery, the hope of emancipation, the struggle of living in a country that does not value your life, but it also carries joy, defiance, creativity, and an irrepressible urge to live fully despite everything. Jazz spreads from New Orleans up the Mississippi River to Chicago, then to New York, then everywhere. It plays in nightclubs and dance halls, on the radio, on phonograph records that you can buy and play at home. Young people embrace it immediately. It is their music, fast and modern, rejecting the waltzes and parlor songs of their parents' generation. It is the soundtrack of rebellion, of short skirts and bobbed hair, of staying out late and living for the moment. But jazz also divides. Older people call it immoral, primitive, a corrupting influence on the youth. Preachers rail against it from the pulpit. Some cities try to ban it or restrict where it can be played. The criticism is often coded in racist language, calling the music savage or uncivilized, revealing the discomfort white America feels with black culture becoming mainstream. Yet white audiences cannot stay away. They pack into the Cotton Club in Harlem, a whites-only venue where black musicians perform for white patrons. They dance to jazz at society parties, at college dances, at debutante balls. They buy records, learn the steps, adopt the slang. They take the music and strip it of its context, enjoying the sound while ignoring the people who created it. Black musicians navigate this with a mixture of pride and frustration. They are celebrated as entertainers but treated as second-class citizens. They play for integrated audiences in the North but cannot stay in the same hotels or eat in the same restaurants. They create art that defines the decade, yet most of them remain poor while white band leaders and record executives get rich. Still, jazz thrives. It evolves, splits into subgenres, influences everything that comes after it. It is the sound of the 1920s, the pulse of the age, the rhythm of a country in motion. And when you hear it, whether in a smoky speakeasy or crackling through a radio speaker, you are hearing America reinventing itself, one improvised note at a time. She cuts her hair short, raises her hemline above her knees, paints her lips red, and dances until dawn. She smokes cigarettes in public, drinks gin in speakeasies, and talks about things women were not supposed to mention a generation ago. She is called a flapper, and she is everything the older generation fears and the younger generation aspires to. But she is also a small minority. Most women in the 1920s are still living traditional lives, still wearing long skirts, still keeping house, and raising children and attending church. The flapper is a symbol, a headline, a fantasy more than a reality. But she represents something important. The idea that women can choose, that they can live differently, that the rules are no longer fixed. And that idea, once planted, does not go away. The flapper bob is the hairstyle of rebellion. Women walk into barbershops and ask for their hair to be cut short just below the ears, sometimes with bangs cut straight across. Their mothers are horrified. Long hair has always been a woman's crowning glory, a symbol of femininity and virtue. To cut it off is to reject everything a woman is supposed to be. But the flapper does not care. Short hair is practical, modern, free. It does not require pins and combs and hours of brushing. It moves when you dance, and it makes a statement. The clothes are just as shocking. Dresses hang straight from the shoulders with no defined waist, the hemline stopping just below the knee or even higher. The silhouette is boyish, flat-chested, narrow-hipped, the exact opposite of the corseted hourglass figure that was fashionable just 10 years earlier. The fabrics are light, often sheer, decorated with fringe and bead that shimmer and sway. When a flapper dances the Charleston, everything moves: the dress, the beads, the fringe, the girl herself. Makeup is bold and obvious: rouge on the cheeks, kohl around the eyes, lipstick in shades of deep red or plum. Before the 20s, respectable women did not wear makeup in public. Only actresses and women of questionable morals painted their faces. But the flapper does it openly, applying lipstick at the table in a restaurant, powdering her nose in public, making a show of it. She smokes, holding the cigarette in a long holder, exhaling smoke with practiced elegance. Cigarette companies market directly to women for the first time, calling cigarettes torches of freedom, symbols of equality. And women buy them, not just because they want to smoke, but because it feels like claiming a right that was denied to them. The flapper drinks often heavily. She goes to speakeasies, orders gin, and keeps up with the men. She dances close, touching bodies, moving to rhythms that are overtly sexual. The Charleston, the Black Bottom, these are not the restrained waltzes of the previous generation. They are energetic, wild, improvisational, and the flapper throws herself into them with abandon. But the flapper is not every woman. She is primarily urban, middle or upper class, young and white. She has the money and the freedom to live this way. Most women are still working in factories, on farms, in domestic service. They are raising children, managing households on tight budgets, living lives that look much the same as their mothers' lives. They might admire the flapper from a distance, might cut their hair a little shorter, or raise their hemlines a few inches, but they cannot afford to fully embrace the lifestyle. And even among flappers, the freedom is limited. They can dance and drink and smoke, but they still face double standards. A woman who is too free with her affections is ruined. A woman who becomes pregnant outside of marriage is shamed. A woman who tries to enter a profession is met with resistance and hostility. The flapper can play at independence, but she cannot fully escape the expectations of a society that still sees women as inferior. Still, the image of the flapper matters. She appears in magazines, movies, advertisements. She becomes a symbol of the modern woman, and even women who do not live like her begin to believe that they could, that the old rules are not as fixed as they once seemed. The flapper plants a seed, and that seed will grow into the women's liberation movements of later decades. For now she is dancing, laughing, living loudly in a world that told her to be quiet. And the world, whether it likes it or not, is watching. On Saturday afternoon, you go to the movies. The theater is ornate, gilded, designed to make you feel like royalty for the price of a ticket. The lights dim, the piano player begins, and the screen flickers to life with images of Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Mary Pickford, Rudolph Valentino. There is no sound, only music and title cards, but the stories are universal and the emotions are clear. The audience gasps, laughs, and cries together in the dark. Going to the movies is not just entertainment. It is an event, a ritual, a chance to escape the factory, the farm, the small apartment, and step into a world of glamour and adventure. The stars are gods, untouchable and perfect, and for 2 hours you believe in magic. The Movie Palace is the most beautiful building in town. The lobby has marble floors, crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains. The auditorium seats hundreds, maybe thousands, with balconies and boxes and rows of plush seats. The walls are decorated to look like Spanish courtyards, Egyptian temples, or Versailles ballrooms. The ceiling might be painted to look like a night sky, complete with twinkling stars created by tiny lights. This is not just a place to watch movies. It is a palace of dreams. You buy your ticket at the box office, a dime or quarter, depending on the theater and the time of day. Children get in for less. You step inside, and the smell hits you immediately. Popcorn, perfume, the faint mustiness of hundreds of people sitting in the same seats. An usher, dressed in a uniform with gold braid, leads you to your seat with a flashlight. The lights dim, and the audience quiets. The projectionist in the booth at the back of the theater starts the film, and the screen comes alive with flickering black and white images. There is no spoken dialogue, so the actors must convey everything through expression and gesture. They exaggerate their movements, widen their eyes, clasp their hands to their chests. The piano player, or sometimes a full orchestra, provides the soundtrack, matching the mood of each scene. Suspenseful music for chase scenes, romantic melodies for love scenes, playful tunes for comedies. Title cards appear between scenes, white text on black backgrounds, giving dialogue or narration. The audience reads them aloud sometimes, especially the children, sounding out the words and laughing at the jokes. Charlie Chaplin shuffles across the screen in his little tramp costume, baggy pants, tight coat, bowler hat, and cane. He trips, stumbles, gets into trouble, and somehow comes out on top. His comedy is physical and universal, understandable to anyone regardless of language or background. Children adore him. Adults admire the skill beneath the slapstick. Buster Keaton never smiles, his face a mask of deadpan seriousness even as the world collapses around him. Buildings fall, trains chase him. He dangles from clocks and climbs onto moving vehicles. The stunts are real, dangerous, performed without special effects or safety nets. The audience holds its breath, then erupts in applause when he survives. Mary Pickford is America's sweetheart, playing innocent young women with curls and wide eyes. She is one of the most powerful people in Hollywood, co-founder of United Artists, earning more money than almost anyone in the industry. But on screen, she is pure, virtuous, the girl every man wants to protect and every woman wants to be. Rudolph Valentino is the opposite, dark, exotic, dangerous. He plays sheiks and bullfighters, smoldering and seductive. Women faint at his appearances. When he dies suddenly in 1926, the grief is national. Thousands line the streets for his funeral. The phenomenon of the movie star, worshipped and mourned like royalty, is born with him. The movies are an escape, and people need escape. They need to forget for a little while about the bills in the factory and the heat and the uncertainty. They need to believe in happy endings, in love triumphant, in good defeating evil. The movies provide that generously and reliably every Saturday afternoon. Newsreels play before the feature, showing current events, parades, disasters, political figures. This is how most people see the world beyond their own town, flickering and silent on a screen. Then come the serials, cliffhangers that end with the hero in peril, bringing audiences back next week to see how they escape. When the movie ends and the lights come up, you blink, disoriented, returning to your own life. You file out with the crowd, back into the daylight or the evening, back to the street and the work in the ordinary world. But for 2 hours, you were somewhere else. You were in love, in danger, in adventure. And next week, you will come back and do it all again. The Ford Model T has put America on wheels. It is cheap enough that a factory worker can afford one, simple enough that anyone can learn to drive it, and sturdy enough to survive the roads, which are mostly dirt and gravel. Suddenly, distances collapse. You can visit the next town, the next county, the next state without waiting for a train or hitching up a horse. Young people drive out into the country to be alone, away from the eyes of parents and neighbors. Families pack into cars and take Sunday drives just for the pleasure of movement. But the automobile also brings noise, pollution, accidents, and traffic jams. It reshapes cities, creates suburbs, and begins the slow death of small-town America. It is freedom, and it is also the beginning of something harder to name. The Model T is not elegant. It is boxy, utilitarian, painted black because black paint dries fastest. The interior is sparse. Just a bench seat, a steering wheel, and a few basic controls. There is no heater, no radio, no cushioning to speak of. The ride is rough, every bump and pothole transmitted directly through the wheels to your spine. But it is yours, and it runs, and that is enough. Starting the car is an adventure. You step to the front and insert the crank into a socket below the radiator. You turn the crank with force, and if you are lucky, the engine catches and roars to life. If you are unlucky, the engine backfires and the crank spins backward, breaking your wrist or your thumb. It happens often enough that everyone knows someone it has happened to. Once the engine is running, you climb into the driver's seat and adjust the controls. There are 3 pedals, but they do not work like the pedals in modern cars. The left pedal is the clutch, the middle pedal is reverse, and the right pedal is the brake. The throttle is a lever on the steering column. It takes practice to coordinate everything, and your first attempts are jerky, the car lurching and stalling until you get the feel of it. The roads are terrible. In cities, some streets are paved with brick or asphalt, but most roads are dirt, graded occasionally by a horse-drawn scraper, but otherwise left to the mercy of weather. In spring, they are mud, deep enough to swallow a wheel and bog down the car until you have to get out and push. In summer, they are dust, clouds of it rising behind every car, coating your clothes and filling your lungs. In winter, they are frozen ruts that jar your teeth and test the strength of your axles. Gas stations are appearing, but they are not yet common. You carry extra fuel in a can in the back, and you plan your trips around where you can refill. The gas is pumped by hand, the attendant working a lever to draw fuel from an underground tank into a glass cylinder so you can see how much you are getting, then into your tank through a hose. Flat tires are inevitable. The tires are thin, the roads are full of rocks and nails and debris, and punctures happen constantly. You carry a spare tire, a jack, and a repair kit. Changing a tire is dirty, physical work, and you learn to do it quickly because standing on the side of the road is dangerous. Other cars pass too close, too fast, without slowing down. The automobile changes courtship. Before, young people courted in the parlor under the watchful eyes of parents. Now they have a car, and they can drive away, out into the country, parking on a dark road where no one can see them. Preachers rail against the automobile as a house of prostitution on wheels. Parents worry. But young people have tasted freedom, and they are not giving it up. Families take Sunday drives, packing into the car with picnic baskets and blankets. They drive into the countryside, find a spot by a river or under a tree, and spend the afternoon outdoors. The journey is part of the pleasure, the sensation of movement, the wind in your face, the landscape rolling past. You are not going anywhere. Particular, just going, and that is enough. But the automobile also brings death. Accidents are common, and they are often fatal. There are no seat belts, no airbags, no safety glass. The cars are heavy and slow, but the roads are dangerous, and when two cars collide or a car hits a tree, the results are catastrophic. Children are killed playing in the streets. Pedestrians are struck and dragged. The death toll rises every year, and there are no laws yet to control it. No speed limits, no driver's licenses, no traffic signals. The automobile is remaking America. It is emptying the countryside and filling the cities. It is creating suburbs where people can live away from the noise and dirt of downtown, but still commute to work. It is killing the railroad passenger business, the horse and buggy trade, the small-town Main Street. It is freedom, mobility, independence. And it is also chaos, danger, and the beginning of a world where distance no longer protects you, where everywhere is reachable, and nothing stays isolated for long. There is darkness in the 1920s, and it walks in broad daylight. The Ku Klux Klan is not hiding in the shadows. It is marching down main streets in white robes, hosting rallies and burning crosses on hillsides. Membership is in the millions, not just in the South, but in Indiana, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. The Klan targets Black Americans, Jewish Americans, Catholic Americans, immigrants, anyone who does not fit their narrow vision of what America should be. They control politicians, infiltrate police forces, and terrorize communities with violence and intimidation. This is the same decade of jazz and flappers and economic boom, and it is also a decade of hatred given power and legitimacy. The two exist side by side, and neither can be understood without the other. The Klan of the 1920s is different from the Klan of Reconstruction. This version is organized, national, and openly political. It recruits members through fraternal networks using the language of patriotism and moral purity. Join the Klan, they say, and you are defending America, protecting white Protestant values from the forces of corruption and decay. The pitch works. By the mid-20s, membership reaches 4 or 5 million, making it one of the largest organizations in the country. They hold rallies in public parks, massive gatherings with thousands of members in white robes and hoods, burning crosses 20 feet tall. They march in parades down main streets, not bothering to hide their faces, proud of their affiliation. In some towns, half the businessmen, the police chief, the mayor, they are all Klan members. To speak against the Klan is to risk your livelihood, your safety, your place in the community. The Klan's targets are clear. Black Americans are lynched, their homes burned, their communities terrorized. The violence is meant to enforce a social order, to keep black people subordinate, afraid, and powerless. The Klan opposes black education, black voting, black economic success. They use intimidation, beatings and murder to enforce their will, and they do it with impunity because the legal system is often complicit. But the Klan also targets others. Jewish Americans are accused of controlling banks and corrupting society. Catholic Americans are seen as loyal to the Pope rather than to America, a threat to Protestant supremacy. Immigrants, especially from Southern and Eastern Europe, are labeled as inferior races, bringing crime and radicalism. The Klan's vision of America is narrow, exclusionary, and violent. They use religion as a weapon, claiming to defend Christian values while spreading hate. They hold cross burnings, claiming the cross is a symbol of their faith, ignoring the fact that they are using it to terrorize their neighbors. Klan preachers give sermons that blend scripture with racism, and congregations nod along, convinced they are doing God's work. The Klan also enters politics. They endorse candidates, pressure lawmakers, and in some states, they effectively control the government. In Indiana, the Klan has enormous influence, and the state legislature passes laws that align with Klan ideology. Oregon passes a law requiring all children to attend public schools, an attempt to destroy Catholic education. The Klan does not just operate in the shadows. It operates in the open, shaping policy and law. But there is resistance. Black communities organize, forming self-defense groups, fighting back against the terror. The NAACP documents lynchings, pushes for federal anti-lynching legislation, and exposes Klan violence in the press. Jewish and Catholic organizations speak out despite the risk. Newspapers in some cities publish exposés naming Klan members and revealing their tactics. And the Klan begins to collapse under its own corruption. Leaders embezzle funds, scandals erupt, and by the late 20s, membership is declining. A prominent Klan leader in Indiana is convicted of rape and murder, and the public backlash is swift. The organization does not disappear, but it loses its mainstream legitimacy, retreating back into the shadows where it began. Still, the damage is done. The Klan of the 1920s has shown that hatred can be organized, popularized, and made respectable. It has shown that terrorism can operate in plain sight, endorsed by neighbors and protected by law. And it has shown that the progress of the 20s, the jazz and the flappers and the modernity, does not extend to everyone. For millions of Americans, the 1920s are not roaring. They are terrifying, and the Klan, marching in daylight, is the proof. America has always been a nation of immigrants, but in the 1920s, the door begins to close. New laws restrict the number of people allowed in, favoring Northern Europeans and barring Asians almost entirely. The reasons given are about economics, about jobs, about preserving American culture. But underneath is fear of the unfamiliar, of languages and customs and faces that do not fit the picture of what America is supposed to look like. Immigrants who are already here live in ethnic enclaves, Little Italies and Chinatowns and Polish neighborhoods where they preserve the old ways while their children learn English and dream of becoming fully American. The tension between old and new, between tradition and assimilation, runs through every family, every generation, and it will not be resolved in this decade or the next. The Immigration Act of 1924 is the culmination of decades of nativist sentiment. It establishes quotas, limiting the number of immigrants from each country to a small percentage of the people from that country already living in the United States. The quotas favor immigrants from Britain, Germany, and Scandinavia, while severely restricting those from Italy, Poland, Russia, and Greece. Immigration from Asia is banned almost completely, continuing the exclusion that began with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. The arguments for restriction are couched in science and economics, but the racism is barely concealed. Eugenicists testify before Congress, claiming that Southern and Eastern Europeans are genetically inferior, prone to crime and disease, incapable of assimilating into American society. Labor leaders argue that immigrants take jobs from native-born workers and drive down wages. Nativists claim that America's culture and identity are under threat, that too much diversity will destroy the nation. The result is a dramatic reduction in immigration. The flood of people that had been arriving through Ellis Island slows to a trickle. Families are separated, with some members in America and others stranded in Europe, unable to join them. The quotas do not apply to immigrants from the Western Hemisphere, so Mexican and Canadian immigration continues, but even that will face restrictions in later decades. For immigrants already in America, life is a balancing act. They live in neighborhoods where their language is spoken, where the shops sell familiar foods, where the church or synagogue or temple offers services in the old tongue. These enclaves provide comfort, community, a buffer against a hostile world. But they also create isolation, making it harder to integrate, easier for outsiders to view them as foreign and threatening. The children of immigrants straddle two worlds. At home, they speak their parents' language, eat their parents' food, follow their parents' customs. At school, they learn English, pledge allegiance to the flag, and absorb American culture. They are embarrassed by their parents' accents, by the old world clothes, by the foods that smell strange to their classmates. They want to fit in, to be American, to leave behind the stigma of being foreign. But the parents resist. They want their children to remember where they came from, to honor the traditions, to speak the language. They fear that assimilation means losing their identity, losing the things that make them who they are. The conflict is painful, playing out at dinner tables and in living rooms, a generational divide that is also a cultural one. Italian families gather in tenement kitchens, making pasta by hand, speaking Sicilian or Neapolitan dialects, preserving recipes and customs from villages they will never see again. Polish families celebrate saints' days with processions and feasts, keeping alive a connection to a homeland that exists now only in memory. Jewish families observe Shabbat, keep kosher, send their children to Hebrew school, building a life that is both American and deeply rooted in tradition. But the outside world is not always welcoming. Immigrants face discrimination in employment, housing, education. Signs in windows say, "No Irish need apply," or "No Italians." Landlords refuse to rent to Jewish families. Children are mocked in school, called names, told to go back where they came from. The promise of America, of opportunity and equality, is real for some, but elusive for many. Still, the immigrants persist. They work hard, save money, start businesses, buy homes. They form mutual aid societies, lending each other money, finding each other jobs, supporting each other through illness and hardship. They build churches and synagogues, schools and social clubs, creating institutions that will outlast them. And slowly, over years and decades, they become American, not by abandoning their heritage, but by weaving it into the fabric of the country. The food, the music, the language, the traditions, they all become part of what America is. The door may be closing, but the people who are already here are staying, building, contributing, and shaping a nation that is richer and more complex because of them. In the summer of 1925, the nation's attention turns to a small courtroom in Dayton, Tennessee, where a teacher is on trial for teaching evolution. The Scopes trial becomes a spectacle, a clash between science and religion, between modernity and tradition, between two visions of America's future. William Jennings Bryan, the great orator and defender of the faith, faces off against Clarence Darrow, the sharp-tongued lawyer and champion of reason. The trial is broadcast on the radio, reported in every newspaper, and debated in every town square. In the end, Scopes is found guilty. But the trial exposes the fault lines running through American culture. It is not just about evolution. It is about who gets to decide what is true, what is taught, and what kind of country this will be. John Scopes is a young science teacher and football coach in Dayton, a quiet town in eastern Tennessee. He agrees, somewhat reluctantly, to be the defendant in a test case challenging Tennessee's Butler Act, which makes it illegal to teach any theory that denies the biblical account of creation. The American Civil Liberties Union is looking for a case to challenge the law, and Dayton civic leaders see an opportunity to put their town on the map. Scopes is arrested, and the trial is set. William Jennings. Bryan volunteers for the prosecution. He is a giant of American politics, a three-time presidential candidate, a former Secretary of State, and a devout Christian. He sees the trial as a chance to defend the Bible, to stand against the rising tide of secularism and modernism that he believes is corrupting the nation. For Bryan, evolution is not just bad science, it is a moral threat, undermining faith and leading to social decay. Clarence Darrow leads the defense. He is one of the most famous lawyers in America, known for defending unpopular causes and taking on powerful institutions. He is an agnostic, a skeptic, a believer in reason and science. For Darrow, the trial is about freedom of thought, about the right to teach facts without interference from religious dogma. The trial begins in July, and the heat is stifling. The courtroom is packed, overflowing into the lawn outside, where loudspeakers carry the proceedings. Reporters from across the country fill the press section. Vendors sell lemonade and souvenirs. The atmosphere is part trial, part carnival. The prosecution's case is simple. Scopes taught evolution, which is against the law, and therefore he is guilty. Witnesses testify that Scopes used a state-approved biology textbook that included a chapter on Darwin's theory. The facts are not in dispute. The defense wants to call scientists and theologians to testify that evolution does not contradict the Bible, that it is possible to believe in God and accept evolution. But the judge rules that such testimony is irrelevant. The trial is not about whether evolution is true, only whether Scopes violated the law. Frustrated, Darrow makes a bold move. He calls Bryan to the stand as an expert on the Bible. Bryan, confident and eager to defend his faith, agrees. What follows is one of the most dramatic moments in American legal history. Darrow questions Bryan relentlessly, asking him if he believes the Bible literally, if he thinks the world was created in 6 24-hour days, if he believes a whale swallowed Jonah, if he thinks a snake spoke to Eve. Bryan tries to defend a literal interpretation, but Darrow's questions expose contradictions and absurdities. Does Bryan believe the earth is only 6,000 years old, despite geological evidence of millions of years? Does he believe all languages came from the Tower of Babel? Bryan stumbles, admits he has not thought deeply about some of these questions, and the crowd murmurs. The great orator, so confident at the start, is being dismantled by Darrow's sharp logic. The questioning is broadcast live, and people across the country listen, riveted. For some, Bryan is a hero defending the faith. For others, he is a relic, clinging to outdated beliefs in the face of modern knowledge. The jury deliberates for 9 minutes and finds Scopes guilty. He is fined $100. But the verdict is almost irrelevant. The real battle was fought in the courtroom between Bryan and Darrow, and in the court of public opinion, the outcome is less clear. Bryan dies 5 days after the trial ends, exhausted and heartbroken. Some say Darrow broke him. Darrow returns to Chicago, celebrated by modernists, reviled by traditionalists. Scopes moves on with his life, never teaching again, but forever remembered as the center of a storm. The Scopes trial does not settle anything. It does not end the debate over evolution or over the role of religion in public life, but it makes the debate national, inescapable, and it reveals a country divided, uncertain of what it believes and who it wants to be. In the spring of 1927, the Mississippi River breaks through its levees and drowns the land. Millions of acres disappear underwater. Homes, farms, entire towns are swept away. Hundreds of thousands of people, most of them black sharecroppers, are displaced, forced into refugee camps where they live in tents and survive on government rations. The flood exposes the brutal realities of race and class in the South, where black laborers are forced at gunpoint to work on the levees while white landowners are evacuated to safety. It is a natural disaster, but it is also a man-made one, the result of years of poor planning, corruption, and indifference to the lives of the poor. The flood will drive the Great Migration, pushing black families north in search of safety, work, and dignity. The rain starts in the fall of 1926 and does not stop. All through the winter and into the spring it rains, heavy and relentless. The Mississippi River, already swollen, begins to rise. By April, it is over the banks, pressing against the levees that are supposed to hold it back. Engineers warn that the levees are failing, that disaster is imminent. But nothing is done. On April 15th, a levee breaks near Mounds Landing, Mississippi. Water pours through the breach, a wall of it 30 feet high, moving at the speed of a galloping horse. It sweeps across the delta, covering everything in its path. Houses are lifted off their foundations and carried away. Livestock drown. People climb onto rooftops, into trees, clinging to anything that floats. The floodwaters spread across parts of 7 states, from Illinois to Louisiana. 27,000 square miles are underwater, an area roughly the size of New England. The water is deep, in some places 20 feet or more, and it stays for weeks, turning the landscape into an inland sea. Refugees flee to higher ground, to the levees that have not yet broken, to the rooftops of buildings in towns that are slowly disappearing. Relief camps are set up, tent cities housing tens of thousands of people. Conditions are grim. There is not enough food, not enough clean water, not enough medicine. Disease spreads. Typhoid, malaria, dysentery. People die, and there is no way to bury them properly, so bodies are left where they fall. The racial dynamics of the disaster are stark and brutal. Black sharecroppers make up the majority of the refugees, but they are treated as laborers, not victims. White landowners, desperate to save their property, force black men at gunpoint to work on the levees, sandbagging and reinforcing the walls even as they crumble. The men work in the rain, in the mud, in waist-deep water, knowing that if they refuse, They will be beaten or killed. In the refugee camps, conditions for black families are worse. They are segregated, given less food, housed in the worst tents. White refugees are evacuated first, given priority for transportation and aid. Black refugees are often held in the camps against their will, prevented from leaving because landowners fear losing their labor force. The Red Cross runs the relief effort, and while they do heroic work feeding and sheltering hundreds of thousands of people, they also cooperate with the local power structure, allowing the exploitation and abuse to continue. The stories that emerge from the camps are horrifying. Women assaulted, men beaten, families torn apart. The flood becomes a turning point in the Great Migration. Black families, seeing the indifference and cruelty they face in the South, decide they cannot stay. They leave for Chicago, Detroit, New York, any place that offers a chance at a better life. The flood accelerates a demographic shift that will reshape the country, emptying the rural South and filling the urban North. The political consequences are significant as well. Herbert Hoover, then Secretary of Commerce, oversees the federal relief effort and uses it to build his political career. He is praised in the press, celebrated as a humanitarian, and the success of the relief effort helps him win the presidency in 1928. But his treatment of black refugees, his willingness to tolerate exploitation and abuse, cost him black votes, contributing to a political realignment that will eventually bring black voters into the Democratic Party. The flood also exposes the failure of the levee system. For decades, the Army Corps of Engineers has built levees higher and stronger, believing they can control the river. But the river cannot be controlled, only managed. The flood proves that a different approach is needed, one that includes spillways, reservoirs, and floodplains. In the years that follow, the Corps redesigns the system, building the infrastructure that will prevent another disaster of this magnitude. But for the people who lived through it, the flood is never forgotten. The water, the loss, the fear, the betrayal, it stays with them. And the country, watching from a distance, sees for the first time the cost of indifference, the price of treating human beings as expendable. The flood of 1927 is a natural disaster, but it is also a moral one, and the consequences will echo for generations. You are being sold to. Everywhere you look, there are advertisements, billboards on the streets, ads in magazines, jingles on the radio. Companies are learning how to create desire, how to convince you that you need things you never knew existed. Refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, automobiles, all of it available on installment plans so you can buy now and pay later. Credit is becoming normal, and so is debt. The idea of consumption as a virtue, as a patriotic duty, as a measure of success is taking root. You are no longer just a citizen. You are a consumer, and your value is measured by what you buy. It is a shift that will define the rest of the century, and it begins here in the 1920s, when advertising becomes an industry and shopping becomes a way of life. The advertisements are everywhere, impossible to escape. Billboards line the highways, massive painted signs urging you to buy soap, cigarettes, automobiles. Magazines are filled with full-page ads showing happy families gathered around new appliances, beautiful women using face cream, handsome men smoking a particular brand of cigarettes. The radio broadcasts jingles, catchy tunes that get stuck in your head and make you remember the product. The language of advertising is changing. It is no longer enough to simply describe a product and list its features. Now, advertisers sell dreams, lifestyles, identities. Buy this car and you will be successful. Use this soap and you will be beautiful. Smoke these cigarettes and you will be sophisticated. The product is not just a thing. It is a promise, a transformation, a ticket to a better life. Advertising agencies hire psychologists to study human behavior, to understand what makes people want things, what triggers desire. They learn the fear works, that shame works, that aspiration works. They create ads that make you feel inadequate, then offer the product as the solution. You are too fat, too plain, too outdated. But buy this and you will be fixed. Department stores become palaces of consumption. You walk through wide aisles past displays of clothing, furniture, housewares, all beautifully arranged, all designed to make you want. Salespeople are trained to be helpful but not pushy, to guide you toward purchases without making you feel pressured. The stores offer credit, installment plans that let you take the item home today and pay for it over weeks or months. It is revolutionary. For the first time, ordinary people can buy things they cannot afford, spreading the cost over time. The installment plan changes everything. Before, you saved until you could afford something, then you bought it. Now you buy it first and pay later. It feels like freedom, like abundance, like progress. But it also means debt, and for many families, the debt grows faster than the income. Appliances are marketed as labor-saving devices, miracles that will free women from the drudgery of housework. The electric washing machine means no more scrubbing clothes by hand on a washboard. The vacuum cleaner means no more beating rugs with a broom. The refrigerator means no more daily trips to the iceman. These are real improvements, genuinely useful, and women embrace them. But the advertising also creates new expectations. With all these labor-saving devices, women should have more time, so they should keep a cleaner house, cook more elaborate meals, maintain higher standards. The work does not decrease, it just changes. And women who cannot afford the appliances feel the gap between the ideal life shown in the ads and their own reality. Automobiles are sold not as transportation, but as symbols of freedom, success, and modernity. The ads show families on open roads, exploring the country, living the American dream. They show businessmen arriving at important meetings, their success reflected in the car they drive. Owning a car becomes a statement, and not owning one becomes a mark of failure. Cigarettes are marketed to women for the first time. The ads show slender, fashionable women holding cigarettes, the message clear. Smoking makes you modern, liberated, attractive. The campaigns work. Women start smoking in public, and the tobacco companies make billions. The culture of consumption becomes tied to identity. You are what you buy. Your taste in clothes, in furniture, in cars, these things define you. They tell the world who you are, or at least who you want to be. And so you buy, even when you cannot afford it, even when you do not need it. Because not buying means being left behind. Credit becomes normal, expected, encouraged. Banks and stores offer credit freely, betting that most people will pay it back, and most do, though slowly and with interest. But for some, the debt becomes overwhelming, a cycle they cannot escape. The economy depends on this consumption. Factories produce more goods than ever before, and those goods need buyers. If people stop buying, the factories close, workers lose jobs, and the economy contracts. So consumption is encouraged, celebrated, made patriotic. To buy is to support the economy, to keep America strong. But there is a fragility to it, a sense that it is all built on borrowed money and borrowed time. The stock market is climbing, wages are rising, people are spending. But underneath, the foundation is shaky. And when it cracks, when the buying stops and the debts come due, the whole system will come crashing down. For now, though, the ads keep running, the products keep appearing, and people keep buying, convinced that this is progress, that this is prosperity, that this is the American way. Everyone is talking about the stock market. It is going up, and it keeps going up, and people who have never owned a share of anything are suddenly buying stocks on margin, borrowing money to invest, convinced that this will go on forever. Wealth is being created, or at least the illusion of wealth, and it is intoxicating. Fortunes are made overnight. Ordinary people become millionaires. The newspapers are full of success stories, of shoeshine boys who bought the right stock and retired rich. No one wants to hear warnings about bubbles, about speculation, about the danger of building an economy on borrowed money and overconfidence. The party is too good, the music too loud, and no one believes it will ever end. The stock market in the 1920s is not just for the wealthy. Ordinary people, middle-class families, shop clerks, and teachers and factory workers, they are all investing. They read the financial pages, follow stock tips, discuss the market over dinner. Investing becomes a pastime, a hobby, an obsession. Buying on margin makes it easy. You do not need to pay the full price of a stock. You put down 10 or 20%, borrow the rest from your broker. And when the stock goes up, you sell, pay back the loan, and pocket the profit. It works. As long as the market keeps rising, and the market keeps rising, so it works. The gains are staggering. A stock that cost $10 in 1925 might be worth $50 by 1929. People who invested a few $100s are now sitting on thousands. They buy more stocks, borrow more money, convinced that the rise will continue indefinitely. Brokerages open in every city, storefronts with ticker tape machines that print out stock prices in real time. People crowd around watching the numbers, cheering when their stocks go up, calculating their gains. The ticker becomes a kind of oracle, a source of truth and fortune. The wealthy invest even more aggressively. They have the capital, the connections, the knowledge. They buy large positions, manipulate prices, trade on insider information. The market is unregulated, a wild frontier where anything goes. Fortunes are made and lost in a single day. Companies issue new stocks to take advantage of the mania. Some are legitimate businesses, factories and railroads and utilities. Others are shell companies, investment trusts that exist only to buy other stocks, pyramids of speculation built on nothing solid. Investors do not care. They buy anyway, trusting that someone else will pay more later. The newspapers feed the frenzy. They publish success stories, profiles of ordinary people who struck it rich. They print advice columns, stock tips, predictions of endless growth. The message is clear. You can get rich. You should get rich. Everyone else is getting rich. And if you are not investing, you are being left behind. Economists warn that the market is overvalued, that the prices do not reflect the actual earnings of the companies, that the whole thing is built on speculation and borrowed money. But no one listens. The warnings are dismissed as pessimism, as old-fashioned thinking, as the grumbling of people who do not understand the new economy. Banks lend freely, trusting that the market will continue to rise and the loans will be repaid. They do not ask hard questions, do not demand collateral beyond the stocks themselves. The system works as long as confidence holds. But confidence is a fragile thing. People begin to live beyond their means. spending the paper profits as if they are real. They buy houses, cars, furniture on credit, assuming their stock portfolio will cover the debt. They feel wealthy, and they act wealthy, and for a while, it feels like the wealth is real. But underneath, the economy is weakening. Factories are producing more goods than people can buy. Farmers are struggling with low prices and debt. Wages are stagnant for most workers, even as the stock market soars. The gains are concentrated at the top, and the foundation is crumbling. Still, the market climbs. In the summer of 1929, it reaches new heights. Investors celebrate, convinced they are witnessing a permanent shift, a new era where prosperity is guaranteed, and the old rules no longer apply. And then in October, the market begins to fall. At first, it is a correction, a small dip, nothing to worry about. But then it accelerates. Stocks that were worth $50 are suddenly worth $30, then $20, then $10. Investors panic. They try to sell, but there are no buyers. The ticker tape falls behind, unable to keep up with the volume of trades. Prices collapse. On October 29th, Black Tuesday, the market crashes. Billions of dollars in value disappear in a single day. People who are millionaires in the morning are broke by the afternoon. Banks that lent money on margin demand repayment, but the borrowers have nothing left. The banks fail. Businesses close. The economy, so dependent on confidence and credit, seizes up. The roar of the 20s becomes the silence of the 30s. The party is over. And the people who believed it would never end are left standing in the wreckage, wondering how it all went so wrong, so fast. In Harlem, something extraordinary is happening. Black writers, poets, musicians, and artists are creating a cultural movement that will reshape American art for generations. Langston Hughes writes poetry that sings. Zora Neale Hurston tells stories that had never been told. W.E.B. Du Bois publishes essays that challenge the nation's conscience. The Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom host performances that white audiences travel uptown to see, even as they refuse to sit beside black patrons in their own neighborhoods. The Harlem Renaissance is a declaration of black humanity, black genius, black joy, in a country that refuses to acknowledge any of it fully. It is defiant, it is beautiful, and it is laying the groundwork for every civil rights struggle that will follow. Harlem in the 1920s is the cultural capital of Black America. It is a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan, and it is also an idea, a place where black artists and intellectuals gather to create, to debate, to build something new. The Great Migration has brought hundreds of thousands of black Americans north from the South, fleeing Jim Crow and lynching, searching for work and freedom. Many of them settle in Harlem, transforming it into a vibrant, densely packed community bursting with energy and ambition. The writers are extraordinary. Langston Hughes writes poems in the rhythms of jazz and blues, capturing the voice of ordinary black people with honesty and beauty. His poem, The Weary Blues, becomes an anthem, blending music and verse in a way that feels entirely new. Zora Neale Hurston travels through the South collecting folk tales, preserving the stories and language of black communities, then transforms them into novels and essays that celebrate black culture without apology. Claude McKay writes with anger and pride, poems that confront racism head-on and refuse to bow. W.E.B. Du Bois, already a towering intellectual figure, edits The Crisis, the magazine of the NAACP, publishing the best, black writers and artists, giving them a platform, amplifying their voices. He argues that art and politics are inseparable, that the struggle for civil rights must be fought in the courts and in the culture, in legislation and in literature. The visual artists are equally powerful. Aaron Douglas creates bold, angular paintings that blend African motifs with modernist techniques, depicting Black history and struggle with dignity and strength. His murals appear in libraries, schools, and public buildings impossible to ignore. Other artists experiment with sculpture, printmaking, photography, all of it pushing back against the racist caricatures that dominate mainstream American culture. The music is the heartbeat of it all. Jazz clubs line Lenox Avenue and other streets, and every night they fill with people eager to hear the latest sounds. Duke Ellington performs at the Cotton Club, his orchestra playing sophisticated arrangements that elevate jazz to an art form. The Cotton Club is a strange place, though, beautiful and tragic at the same time. The performers are Black, the music is Black, but the audience is white only, wealthy patrons who come uptown to be entertained but would never invite the musicians into their homes. The Savoy Ballroom is different. It is integrated, one of the few places in America where Black and white people dance together. Though even there, the mixing is limited, tentative, watched carefully by those who fear what equality might look like. The dances are wild, inventive. The Lindy Hop born here, named after Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight. A dance that is acrobatic and joyful and free. The writers and artists gather in sayings and apartments and rented rooms to read their work, to argue, to support each other. They debate what Black art should be, whether it should be political or purely aesthetic, whether it should confront white audiences or speak only to Black communities. They do not agree on everything, but they agree that what they are doing matters, that they are building something that will outlast them. White patrons play a complicated role. Some, like Carl von Vechten, genuinely admire Black culture and use their wealth and connections to promote Black artists. Others treat Harlem like a zoo, a place to visit for exotic entertainment, slumming uptown to feel daring and modern without ever questioning their own racism. The artists take the support where they can find it, knowing it is flawed, knowing it is not enough, but using it to create work that will endure. The Harlem Renaissance does not solve racism. It does not end segregation or stop lynching. Black people in America still face brutality, poverty, and exclusion. But the Renaissance proves something essential, that Black culture is rich, complex, and vital, that Black artists can compete with anyone, that Black voices deserve to be heard. It plants seeds that will grow into the civil rights movement, into Black power, into every assertion of Black dignity that follows. And it creates art, poetry, and music, and paintings and stories that will be read and heard and seen for generations, long after the nightclubs close and the salons empty, and Harlem itself changes beyond recognition. In May of 1927, a young airmail pilot named Charles Lindbergh climbs into a small plane called the Spirit of St. Louis and takes off from New York. 33 hours later, he lands in Paris, the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. The world goes wild. Lindbergh becomes an instant hero, the symbol of American courage, ingenuity, and the triumph of the individual. Ticker tape parades, medals, adoration. He is everything the 1920s wants to believe about itself. But the flight is also a turning point. Aviation is no longer a novelty. It is the future. The world is shrinking, and the age of distance is ending. What Lindbergh proves is that nothing is impossible, And that belief will carry America into the next decade, right up until the moment it crashes. The flight is a gamble from the beginning. Others have tried to cross the Atlantic and failed, some disappearing into the ocean, their planes never found. A wealthy hotel owner has offered a prize of $25,000 to the first person to fly nonstop from New York to Paris, and several teams are competing well-funded expeditions with multiple crew members and large aircraft. Lindbergh is different. He is 25 years old, relatively unknown, flying alone in a plane, built specifically for this flight, stripped of everything unnecessary to save weight. There is no radio, no parachute, no sextant for navigation. Just Lindbergh, a compass, a map, and enough fuel to make it if everything goes perfectly. He takes off from Roosevelt Field on Long Island on the morning of May 20th. The plane is so heavy with fuel that it barely clears the telephone wires at the end of the runway. He flies northeast, over the coast of Newfoundland, then out over the open ocean. There is nothing below him but water, nothing ahead but clouds and uncertainty. He stays awake for the entire flight, fighting exhaustion, hallucinating from lack of sleep, seeing phantoms in the cockpit, hearing voices. He flies by instinct and calculation, adjusting for wind, for drift, for the pull of the earth. 33.5 hours after takeoff, he sees lights below. It is the coast of Ireland. He has done it. He continues on to Paris, circling the Eiffel Tower before landing at Le Bourget airfield. A crowd of 100,000 people is waiting. They rush the plane, lifting Lindbergh onto their shoulders, tearing pieces of fabric from the aircraft as souvenirs. He is dazed, exhausted, barely able to comprehend what he has accomplished. The news spreads around the world. Lindbergh is front-page news in every country. He is invited to meet kings, presidents, prime ministers. He is given medals, honors, parades. When he returns to New York, 4 million people line the streets for a ticker-tape parade, the largest in the city's history. He is called Lucky Lindy, the Lone Eagle, a hero unlike any the world has seen. But Lindbergh is more than a hero. He is a symbol. In an age of machines and mass production, he represents the individual, the lone man conquering the elements through skill and courage. In a country growing increasingly urban and industrial, he represents the frontier spirit, the pioneer pushing into the unknown. He is young, handsome, modest, everything America wants to see in itself. The flight also represents technological progress. Aviation, which just 24 years earlier had been a fantasy, is now practical, possible, inevitable. If Lindbergh can fly across the ocean alone, then commercial flight is not far behind. The world is getting smaller. Oceans are no longer barriers. Distance is no longer protection. The implications are enormous, both thrilling and terrifying. Lindbergh becomes one of the most famous people in the world, and he struggles with it. He did not seek fame. He sought accomplishment. But the fame is inescapable. Everywhere he goes, crowds follow. Newspapers report his every move. He is pursued, photographed, quoted, analyzed. He tries to use the attention to promote aviation, to encourage investment in airlines and airfields, and in that, he succeeds. The flight sparks a boom in aviation. Airlines expand, airmail routes multiply, and within a few years, passenger service across the Atlantic will begin. But there is a darkness ahead for Lindbergh. In 1932, his infant son will be kidnapped and murdered, a crime that will horrify the nation and turn Lindbergh's life into a nightmare of grief and intrusion. The hero who represented everything hopeful about America will retreat, becoming increasingly isolated eventually expressing sympathies for fascism that will tarnish his legacy forever. But in 1927, none of that has happened yet. In 1927, Lindbergh is pure heroism, pure achievement, pure possibility. He has shown that the impossible is possible, that the future is arriving faster than anyone imagined, and that America, for all its flaws and contradictions, is capable of extraordinary things. The flight is a moment of triumph, and for a country that desperately wants to believe in itself, it is exactly the symbol it needs. The 1920s are not innocent, but there is a belief, a hope, a sense that progress is inevitable and that the future will be better than the past. That belief is fragile, built on credit and speculation and willful ignorance of the cracks forming underneath. But for now, the music is still playing, the stock market is still climbing, and the party is still going. You can feel it in the air, the sense that something big is coming, something that will change everything. But no one knows what it is yet, and no one wants to think about it too hard. So you keep dancing, keep drinking, keep spending, keep believing that this moment, this feeling, this life will last forever. The decade has been a whirlwind, a blur of change so rapid that it is hard to keep your footing. You have gone from horses to automobiles, from silence to radio, from letters to telephones. You have seen women cut their hair and raise their hemlines, seen jazz replace ragtime, seen the speakeasy replace the saloon. You have watched movies flicker to life on screens, listened to voices coming through the air from 1,000 miles away, ridden in cars that go faster than you ever thought possible. The economy has boomed. Factories are producing goods in quantities that would have been unimaginable just 20 years ago. Wages have risen, at least for some. The stock market has climbed to heights that seem to defy gravity. Everywhere you look, there is construction, new buildings rising, new roads being paved, new technologies being introduced. It feels like the future is arriving ahead of schedule, like America is racing towards something glorious. But there are signs, if you look closely, that all is not well. The farmers are struggling, crushed by debt and falling crop prices. The coal miners are suffering, their industry in decline. The textile mills of the South are exploiting workers, paying starvation wages, resisting every attempt to organize. The wealth is concentrating at the top, and the gap between rich and poor is widening. But these are quiet problems, rural problems, problems that do not make headlines in the cities where the party is loudest. There are other cracks, too. Prohibition has created a massive criminal underworld, gangs running bootleg liquor, bribing police and politicians, killing each other in the streets. The Ku Klux Klan has marched in daylight, terrorizing communities, proving that hatred can organize and thrive. The immigration door has closed, revealing a country uncertain of its own identity, fearful of difference. The Scopes trial has exposed deep divisions between faith and science, tradition and modernity, divisions that will not be resolved in this decade or any other. And there is the stock market, climbing higher and higher on borrowed money and borrowed confidence. Everyone knows, on some level, that it cannot continue forever. But no one wants to be the one who says it out loud, who stops dancing, who steps away from the table. Because to admit that the boom is fragile is to risk ending it, and no one wants to be responsible for that. So you keep going. You go to work, you come home, you turn on the radio and listen to the music. You go to the movies on Saturday and watch the stars live lives of glamour and romance. You drive your car into the country on Sunday and pretend that the world is simple, that the future is secure, that nothing bad can happen as long as you keep moving forward. But deep down, you know it is an illusion. Deep down, you know that the good times are built on a foundation that is cracking, that the debts will come due, that the music will stop. You know because you have seen it before, in smaller ways, in personal disasters that taught you that nothing lasts, that security is always temporary, that the world can change in an instant. And you are right. The crash is coming. The Great Depression is waiting just around the corner, ready to sweep away the prosperity, the optimism, the belief that America is invincible. The breadlines will form, the banks will fail, the factories will close. The decade that roared will end with a whimper, and the people who live through it will spend the rest of their lives trying to make sense of how it all fell apart so quickly. But that is not yet. For now, in this moment, the lights are still on, the music is still playing, and the party is still going. For now, you can still believe, even if only for one more night, that the good times will last. For now, you can dance like nothing is wrong, drink like tomorrow will never come, spend like the money will never run out. For now, you can hold on to the illusion that the 1920s, with all their energy and excitement and promise, will go on forever. Even though you know, somewhere deep inside, that they will not. And then it ends. In October of 1929, the stock market collapses. Not slowly, not gently, but in a sudden, catastrophic freefall that wipes out fortunes, destroys savings, and sends the entire economy into a tailspin. The roar of the 20s becomes the silence of the 30s. Banks fail, factories close, farms are foreclosed, and millions of people lose everything. The bread lines form, the soup kitchens open, and the men who were millionaires on paper are now standing in line for work that does not exist. The crash does not just end the party, it ends the illusion, the belief that prosperity is permanent, that growth is guaranteed, that America is immune to the laws of gravity. And what comes next is a decade of suffering that no one saw coming. The warning signs are there all through September. The market dips, recovers, dips again. Investors are nervous, but not panicked. This has happened before, small corrections that resolve themselves. But in October, the dips become drops. On October 24th, Black Thursday, the market plunges. Panic selling begins. Investors try to unload stocks, but there are no buyers. Prices collapse. A group of bankers meets and agrees to buy stocks to stabilize the market, and for a moment, it works. The market rallies slightly and people breathe easier. Maybe it was just a scare. Maybe the worst is over. But it is not over. It is just beginning. On October 29th, Black Tuesday, the bottom falls out. 16 million shares are traded, a record that will stand for decades. The ticker tape cannot keep up, running hours behind the actual trades. Investors watch in horror as the numbers scroll past, each one lower than the last, their wealth evaporating in real time. Stocks that were worth hundreds of dollars are now worth pennies. Fortunes disappear in hours. People who bought on margin, who borrowed money to invest, are wiped out completely. The brokers demand payment, but the stocks are worthless and there is nothing to sell. Families lose their life savings. Investors jump from windows, unable to face the ruin. The suicides become part of the legend of the crash, though later research will show they were fewer than reported. But the image persists because it captures the despair, the sense that everything has been lost. The crash spreads like a contagion. Banks that lent money on stocks fail when the loans cannot be repaid. When banks fail, depositors lose their savings because there is no insurance, no federal protection. People who had nothing to do with the stock market, who never bought a share, lose everything because their money was in a bank that made bad loans. Businesses fail next. Factories that produce goods on credit, expecting to be paid when the goods sold, find that no one is buying. Stores close, orders are canceled, production stops. Workers are laid off by the thousands, then by the tens of thousands, then by the millions. Unemployment rises to levels never seen before, 25%, 30% in some areas, even higher among black workers and immigrants who are always the first to be let go. Farms, already struggling through the 20s with low prices and high debt, collapse entirely. Crop prices fall so low that it is not worth harvesting. Farmers burn corn for heat because it is cheaper than buying coal. Banks foreclose on mortgages, evicting families who have worked the land for generations. The dispossessed load their belongings onto trucks and head west, searching for work, for hope, for anything. The crash does not just destroy wealth, it destroys confidence. People stop spending because they are afraid. Businesses stop investing because they see no future. The economy spirals downward, each failure feeding the next, the contraction accelerating until it feels like the entire system is collapsing. President Hoover insists that the fundamentals of the economy are sound, that prosperity is just around the corner. He resists calls for federal intervention, believing that the economy will correct itself, that government action will only make things worse. But the economy does not correct itself. It gets worse, month after month, year after year. The depression deepens, and Hoover's reassurances ring hollow. Shanty towns spring up on the edges of cities, clusters of makeshift shelters built from scrap wood, cardboard, and tin. They are called Hoovervilles, a bitter joke at the president's expense. Families live in them, cooking over open fires, sleeping on the ground, surviving on whatever charity they can find. Bread lines stretch around blocks, men and women waiting for hours for a loaf of bread, a bowl of soup, anything to keep them alive. The soup kitchens are run by churches and charities, overwhelmed by the demand, doing their best but never able to feed everyone. People stand in line, faces hollow, eyes empty, wondering how it came to this, how the prosperity of just a year ago turned into this nightmare. The crash of 1929 does not just end the 20s, it ends an era. It shatters the belief in unregulated capitalism, in the idea that markets will always correct themselves, that prosperity is the natural state of things. It forces America to confront the cost of inequality, of speculation, of building an economy on credit and hope. And it ushers in a new decade, the 1930s, that will be defined by suffering, by struggle, and eventually by the slow, painful work of rebuilding a broken nation. So we have walked through a full day, a full decade in the 1920s. We have woken up in a world without running water, dressed in layers and corsets, eaten breakfast cooked on a wood stove. We have ridden streetcars and driven Model Ts down rutted roads. We have worked in factories and on farms, listened to the radio, watched silent movies, danced to jazz in smoky speakeasies. We have seen the Klan march in daylight and the Harlem Renaissance bloom in the darkness. We have watched Lindbergh fly across the ocean and the stock market crash into the abyss. The 1920s were not simple. They were not just flappers and jazz and prosperity. They were also struggle and violence and inequality. They were the modern world being born, painfully, chaotically, out of the old world that would not quite let go. And the people who lived through them were not characters in a story. They were real as you and me, living their lives the best they could with what they had. When you look at old photographs from the 20s, when you see those faces staring back at the camera, remember that they did not know how the story would end.
They did not know the crash was coming, did not know that the 30s would bring the Depression, that the 40s would bring war. They were living in the moment, same as we are, hoping for the best, fearing the worst, trying to make sense of a world that was changing faster than they could understand. And maybe that is the real lesson of the 1920s, that every era feels uncertain to the people living through it, that progress and disaster live side by side, that the future is always arriving faster than we are ready for, and that the best we can do is pay attention, hold on to each other, and remember that we are all just trying to get through the day, same as the people who came before us, same as the people who will come after. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and close your eyes, maybe take a moment to appreciate what you have. The clean water that runs from your tap, the heat that keeps you warm, the refrigerator humming in your kitchen, the quiet that comes without fear. These things are not small. They are the result of 100 years of struggle, of people fighting for better lives, for safer work, for dignity and justice. The 20s were part of that struggle. They were messy and flawed and human, but they moved us forward, even when it did not feel like it. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about these people, these lives, this decade that shaped everything that came after. If you found something in this that moved you, that made you think, that helped you understand a little better what it was really like, then this was worth making. Take care of yourselves, sleep well, and remember, the past is not a fantasy. It is real, and the people who lived it were just as real as you are. They deserve to be remembered, not as caricatures or symbols, but as people, complicated, contradictory, struggling, surviving, living, just like us. Good night, son, and thank you for walking through the 1920s with me.